Shepherding Chaos, the Retail 247 podcast. Embracing change in the world of retail tech.
Hello and welcome to our next episode of Shepherding Chaos. I'm joined by Alan Morris. It's been a while, and today we're going to attempt to talk about the pending legislation and impact on retail around the digital product passport. Alan, good morning. Welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Martin. Good to be here again. Seems like a while since I've been with you. So, what do we know about DPP then? Digital product passports.
I guess in summary, so we at Retail 247 have been doing quite a lot of research and making sure that our products can be aligned to what sort of technical requirements are going to be driven by it. But in essence, in my mind, it could be the biggest change to retail technology, well, ever, certainly since the barcode and capturing sales at that level. And my understanding here and now is that, and we'll explore some of these questions as we go, but in essence, we could have imposed upon us by the legislative need and public opinion the requirement to track every individual garment now from its creation and beyond, before its creation in terms of its material composition, etc., through to the sale, through to repairs, through to every part of that journey, and more importantly, we have to give the public access to that information.
So that's every product. So it's going away from the SKU.
Yeah, this individual, stylish black T-shirt. Yeah.
So this is going down to the fact that rather than a product having an SKU, every product in effect has a serial number.
Yeah, so a sub-SKU level, as you say, and an RFID level, although probably RFID isn't going to be the vehicle, but certainly down at that serialized level.
Wow, that is a significant change.
Well, impact. I mean, if you think about it, it not only is at a stock management level. I mean, there are impacts there which we'll discuss, but it's down to everything from making the sale. So it's tracking every individual garment, as you say.
So it goes across the whole spectrum from, like you say, from sourcing all the way through to the sale and beyond.
Yeah, I think the circular economy is the sort of current phrase, isn't it? And it's about making sure that it's the sale, but it's potential repairs depending on the merchandise type, and everything from a resale effectively. So really understanding that product's lifespan and journey.
So how do you think retailers are going to take to this?
Yeah. The latest wave of change and therefore cost. And the thing that's different to me this time really is well, let's go back a step. It's the legislative impact, and it's EU driven at the moment. So obviously we're not part of the EU anymore, but we want to trade with the EU. Therefore, we're going to have these conditions imposed upon us. And I think we'll also see, I think maybe there are even some moves in the US to follow a certain, the same sort of pattern. But the important thing this time round is that, the wave of public opinion will drive us. So there's the meeting of legislative imposition and public opinion around sustainability and the green world and saving the planet that will actually force the retailer to do something this time around.
Yeah, I can see that. Maybe we can come back to that in a moment. But I mean, really, when you think about it, over the course of our careers, I mean, there's been so many times where, there's been a legislative change talked about, or there's been a pending issue. We're both survivors of the Millennium Bug.
Yeah, but then the Euro project that never really happened.
Yeah, exactly. So
this, I think, this is going to be of that bigger magnitude probably than either of those projects. I think potentially. But I think it will happen this time around. Now, do I think it'll happen this time around? I do. There will be delays, I'd imagine, when people assess the impact of it. Again, just think about that supply chain journey of a product. It's, and we'll come back to pre-product, as in the what cotton, where did the cotton come from, who is it farmed by, etc. But then tracking every individual item through its lifespan. Impacts the supply chain process, the warehousing process, the internal stock movement process, the sale process, the return process, and really impacts all the systems we come to be familiar with today.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting. You made a point about the customers. Yeah, obviously customers, we are all customers of somebody, and we're all becoming, or we should all be becoming, more aware of our need to play our part in protecting the environment and reducing our carbon footprints and elongating the lifespan of the world.
Yeah, because you dug out some pretty. I mean, we validated them this morning, so some pretty stats
around
the impact.
And they're quite alarming. I mean, that's why we do the validation of them, because they seemed as if somebody put the decimal point in the wrong place on some of them. But I suppose just before we get into that, just for complete clarity, I think just going back to the point you made about the fact that consumers, the customers will drive this. Retailers pride themselves, the best retailers pride themselves on the ones who are being able to respond quickest to consumer demand.
Yeah.
So this isn't just a case of the EU say, or the government say, or somebody says. This is the case of the people that you are here to serve and the people you want to delight and the people you want to give the best experience to are demanding.
Yes, and I'll only caveat that slightly with, I don't know how this necessarily impacts the and sorry, Primark, the lower point, the level of desire to get a bargain. Still, there inevitably going to be price increases on the back of this. I would have thought the processing, the quality of garments will have to improve, and the whole fast fashion thing might be questioned.
Well, I think let's sort of dive into some of these stats for a moment. Just for as far as I understand it, the digital product passports are actually aimed in the first wave at textile.
Yes, I think that's, and correct me on the timescales, but that's likely to be the first trial tranche, and that's a couple of years away.
I believe so. I think that compliance. The date for compliance has been set at 2030. Right. Yes, you have to take these dates with a bit of a pinch of salt because they do move. Yeah. I mean, it's likely that it won't be 2030; it'll be 2031 or whatever.
Who knows?
We're not here to second guess that. But if we just explore why this might be such a demand for why customers might be demanding this more as they become more aware of environmental issues. Interestingly, that the 66% of global customers, according to a CNBC report, said that they would be willing to pay more if a brand became sustainable. Now, obviously, when customers say that,
to a point,
absolutely. But I guess the fact that when you look at, and I'm sorry I keep looking down here, but I won't be able to remember all of these figures. But I'm trying to find the figure that 85% of all textiles go into a dump every year. So does that suggest we should be buying less, maybe paying more?
Yeah, or keeping longer, and then that circular economy thing, that reuse and repair, and the vintage of this world, the moving on of merchandise rather than just disposing needs to change.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. My son uses Vinted a lot, either to buy and to sell, and I mean Vinted would never have existed. My elder son used
it's become socially acceptable and indeed preferable sometimes, hasn't it? It's a I'm going to draw an analogy to a jumble sale, but that's not quite what I mean. But that was looked down upon, wasn't it? Whereas now it's almost trendy.
Yeah, no, it is, and
it is trendy,
and hopefully it will become increasingly so. I mean, we 8 to 10% of all global emissions come from the fashion industry, apparently.
Wow, yeah, scary.
It is scary, and what's even more scary is that apparently 11,000 litres of water are used in the production of 1 kilogram of cotton.
The mind boggles. I don't even know how that's possible. But yes, no, we Googled that stat this morning between us and both came at the same number. So
somebody's then got on to calculate that we're both wearing jeans this morning, and actually it took 3,625 litres of water to prepare each pair of jeans we're wearing, which actually is the same amount of water that could support the life of one person for 2.5 years living a basic life. I mean, it does. Yeah, when you hear these stats,
it is, and very interesting, very relevant, but I guess slightly off subject of the DP, the digital product passport thing. That's going to impose tracking and visibility. Quite how we then resolve the manufacturing process that is the issue. Is a difficult question.
That's the next area, because what we don't know at the moment is if they are being out of compliance, who is responsible for compliance?
Yes, good point. We discussed that this morning as well. There's a view, I've heard views that it's the manufacturer's responsibility, and obviously it is to a certain extent, although the retailer will be held accountable for validation of that compliance, and there are whole industries growing on the back of that certification and compliance world. But ultimately, if it is the circular economy and we are compelled to track things like returns, resales and repairs, then it has to be the retailer's responsibility, or certainly the retailer needs to be involved. So I think the retailer can't just wash their hands of it in minimal amounts of water. They need to be at least aware of inbound supply chain, prove that they're complying with, modern slavery, with all the good things that are going to make the world a better place. But then equally take ownership of subsequent events against that product, so that the returns and repairs, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only way it will work is if compliance is a shared obligation.
Yeah, and it's interesting to watch. There are, there's an argument that says it should be some global or at least European body that tracks all garment movements, the GS1s of this world. But I don't think they've got interest in that. Could be wrong, and there are companies making a play for that bigger picture. So it's an evolving landscape, and it's going to be really interesting to look.
It is, and I suppose really, if customers become more demanding, in a way, it's actually customer demand that'll regulate it.
Yeah, and let's just drop back to that, I guess, because I mentioned earlier, and customers have the right to see. So this is theoretically every garment, every product having it's perceived to be a QR code as the best vehicle currently. So a QR code that lives with the garment through its life, and a QR code that can be scanned by the consumer to see that journey and to see certain specific events that have happened to that garment through its supply chain.
That's going to be. It's
aesthetically, it's a challenge for a start.
It is massive, massively, especially the smaller the product.
Yeah,
but equally, it's one of those things that I suppose it's got to have more than a "I can do that" factor. I think there's always that fear that you introduce something new and people look at it to begin with. Customers look at it, everybody tracks it, and they go, "Oh, it's fantastic! Look at that! We can see that the pair of jeans I've got here were manufactured here, and this was the date they were manufactured. This is how they were manufactured. This is how they were shipped. This is when they arrived in the UK. This is when they got to the distribution center. This is when they, were distributed to me. Fantastic, and I can track it. And then taking the stage further, I then sell them on Vinted or another marketplace app, and so somebody you buy my jeans and you can see the fact that I once owned them. I mean, obviously,
there are many boundaries and issues.
There's going to be GDPR issues there, but the point is, it's a novelty, and we'll all want to do it to begin with. But I suppose it's when, How does that become part of everyday life?
Yeah, we could design the flow on a piece of paper, but as you've alluded to there, just even passing ownership of something through a sale like Vinted, the cooperation and compulsion to use that process is significant. And I'm not sure we'd ever get there properly, but we might. It'll take a while. I think so. We just layer it back to what we are going to have to do in the short term, and that'll probably be focused around the inbound supply chain, I guess.
I mean, one thing we've learnt over the last sort of X number of years is we should never say never to anything, especially where technology and retail are concerned, because things that we would have said, well, that's never going to happen 20 years ago, suddenly become a real thing.
The implementation of omnichannel.
It's amazing how things that you thought were so sort of tomorrow's world are here today. So we can never say never, but I suppose with something as serious as this, because to me, this shouldn't just be a health and hygiene factor. We've passed compliance because we can track a product from source all the way through to the point we've sold it, and then maybe we can track it further on through its lifespan up until the point where it becomes unwearable and has to find its way into the dump. So we reduce this 85% of all textiles, even if we can halve that, and this helps, and brilliant. But it's something we need to do.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, 100%. Just occurred to me though, if you were reducing the in essence, we're talking about reducing or increasing the life of products, and I'm thinking textiles particularly. What does that do to the retail world? I mean, we're going to be selling less by definition, selling at a higher price. There are going to be casualties, or certainly a massive a shift around what retailers that are successful look like.
But that's just part and parcel of the retail ecosystem. Those that don't adapt die. Those that do adapt prosper.
But retail, in my career, continually shoots itself in the foot with the bringing forward of the sale and the deeper sale percentage cuts, etc. And the public, is now well educated to expect a bargain. And that mindset has to change significantly.
Well, I suppose that's one of the other considerations, which isn't a systemic consideration. It's actually it's around this that's going to make it something more appealing. How do the retailer market this as something that's really, really positive? And then how do they market the fact that some of the changes that they're going to have to put into the business, like less promotions, slightly higher price, if that's what it takes, that's actually a good thing as well. So it's all very well a customer saying, yeah, I want to be really eco. But if you want to be really eco and actually you want to buy a t-shirt for $1.99 and you think about the on costs and you look back down the supply chain and you realize how cheaply that's been manufactured, bought into the country, sold, and somebody still made a profit on the back of it, then those days are going to have to somehow, somebody's going to have to market that to be palatable.
And there's going to have to be mass adoption because if it's their use, 10% of retailers doing it, and then you can still go get a bargain elsewhere. It almost has to be mass cooperation, but we'll see. But
again, there's got to be consumer demand driven. I mean, on a slight aside, but a similar principle or the same principle, I was chatting with some friends over Christmas, and we were talking about they were championing the need for reduction in farming. I have some really interesting conversations with my friends, but this was really interesting. But it sounds a bit dry for a Christmas party, but here we go. And so, they were saying about there needs to be a reduction in farming because, farmers, the emissions from farms and dairy herds are far too big was the example that was given. And I agreed with them. I said, dairy farms are far too big. Where do you buy your milk from? And they say, well, we buy it from Lidl or Aldi because it's cheap. And they said, where do you buy yours from? I said, I buy mine from wherever I need to get it from. But it tends to be Ocado because Waitrose or Ocado, but only because they deliver to the village I live in. Before you start making any further comments on that, and I said, the thing is that you can't champion this demand of reduced farming where you want to spend as little as possible on milk, because if you work out the maths on that, a farmer's got to have far more cows to make the milk to make any type of money. But if he was allowed to increase the price of his milk or her milk, then the reality is that they would have to produce less. So it's the same principle, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we haven't fixed that one, so we'll see how this one goes.
Well, we haven't. But if we're all serious about changing the world for the better and being more conscious of the environment, we have to adopt this. But I think retailers, from a marketing point of view and rebranding point of view, have also got to be aware of they've got to get that message across, because it's no point saying, we best prices and eco. Unless somebody can, I'm saying it can't be done. Somebody somewhere may well be able to do it.
Yeah, no, and it's, I think it might see the push of smaller brands as well, the startup brands that we've seen that are embracing this area. We've just done some work with Piglet in Bed. We launched one of our solutions with them, and their proposition, their whole, mantra is around the environmental credentials of what they do as well, and that's seeing them gain success. If we can take that to the masses, but we'll see.
I think that's a good point. I mean, there are a whole plethora of smaller retailers who are very eco is right on top of their agenda. Finisterre is another brand, and Generous Ape, who are an online retailer that I've become aware of. They're the same. I wonder whether, when you start to get bigger, then maybe it becomes more focused on
commercial
finances, too much commercial pressure.
Let's just drift back to technology a bit then, because that's what we're theoretically good at.
Absolutely.
So where we set off this discussion was the impact on technology infrastructure and the scale of project and change that's going to have to be embraced by retailers over the next few years. And I stand by that statement. We've got to start thinking about it now. We might not do anything now, but we've got to be aware of the types of projects that are going to be coming up over the next few years. And if we embark on a new project, we've got to be aware of where the decisions we make in that project should acknowledge the fact that this change is coming. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So what sort of thing could a retailer do now?
Yeah. Well, it's all about being aware of what's going on, the type of events that we need to record against a product. But more importantly, if we genuinely have to embrace products at the individual garment level, the serialization level, as you say, it's about solutions that can do that. And it's about, let me take a step sideways. When retailers were never going to manage their business at that level, we're still going to want to report on performance of a SKU and a department, etc., the traditional hierarchy. But below that, below the covers, we're going to have to start tracking individual items and being aware of where scans will fail at a certain point in the supply chain. So we'll see deviation in stock levels almost as it goes through this journey. So there's going to have to be a number of rules and a different way of thinking around how we commercially manage stock accuracy, for example.
Yeah.
And that means, as I said earlier, that means every touch point with a garment potentially, theoretically, has to be aware of a serialization rather than just a SKU. And so that's every system we embrace. So that's warehousing systems, that's store receipting systems, that's sales systems, and sales, point of sale effectively could sell at that level.
Yeah, I suppose also, as equally as fundamentally as that, it's do your systems currently hold the information that's going to be required for this? I mean, obviously, maybe not the serial number for the product because that's new, but in terms of fabric composition, how low did you have to go on fabric composition?
Actually, I've been talking and focusing on the supply chain journey and the understanding of the stock movement. But you're right, it's the other side of the equation where we have to make visible to the consumer, and for lots of legislative reporting concerns, things like composition, things like proper descriptions of a product that we can make visible to the public. So that whole avoiding the sales pitch, that whole PIM world around product data and product information that's accurate and available and visible, it will become more and more critical.
But what I know, a lot of people have adopted PIM solutions or have enhanced their ERP solutions to hold things such as fabric composition. There must still be an awful lot to actually keep this information off system. Yeah,
there's the inevitable. I mean, the retailers we talk to before we deploy, the spreadsheet is still prevalent, and the multiple versions of the spreadsheet is still prevalent. But we are seeing an awareness of how sensible it is to bring, the critical foundational silos of data into play. So product data and stock data, the basics of what we do, really.
So, in terms of the fact that retail is made up of a whole load of silos, whether it be a piece of paper or something on a really good system or a spreadsheet or wherever it might be, the fact that we need to bring that data together into one source where it can be easily accessed.
Yeah, and accessed at volume. Just think about it again. We're talking about consumer access to individual garments. So the data that we're holding, but also the access to that data is going to be, exponentially increased.
Okay, yeah, the processing will be significant, won't it?
Yeah, but we do have that, that power these days. The modern compute world delivered by cloud providers. I think we've probably touched on this before in podcasts, but when I was a developer, there were concerns around how many K we had available in a window. But now we've got petabytes of computing power and storage.
We have if you're in that world.
Yeah,
because there's still a lot of people who don't have that burstable,
true.
Or expandable, retractable processing and data storage capacity. Yeah, there's still the people who are buying. Going back into the day of the S400, buying DASD upgrades and CPU upgrades to process the perceived increase in next year's sales.
Yeah.
And that's one advantage we have now, is that we do have this sort of tap effect.
Scalable. All that changes is the level of complexity and incomprehensibility of the Amazon bill. I get more power and I pay a few more pence, but I perceive it as value and certainly easier to manage.
That's life. If you perceive something as value, then you're quite happy.
So that's my summary there. I think mass change to potentially all systems that impact the full supply chain of products, and we don't need to dive headlong into it straight away, because it's still flexing. But we certainly need to plan for it. We certainly need to be aware of it, and we certainly need to make sure that decisions we make take heed of potential change.
Are you aware of any retailers who are already considering this?
That's a question you should have asked me before we started.
Yeah.
All retailers. I've been to a few sort of green events of late, and there's a lot of retailers who have created departments around called various things, but in essence, compliance and how they make themselves sustainable. I don't yet think it's fully filtered down to the technology impact and the requirements that it will drive. There's a small wave starting, but it's not there yet.
Again, it's not this.
Sorry, there are a number of there, but the other side of the coin, there are a lot of technology solutions that are starting to post about it. We are doing the same. There are solutions that perhaps if historically being more about stock counting, stock taking, that are starting to stay. Actually, we now can embrace the supply chain need around that, and we've got the infrastructure to make that possible. People like ourselves who have a stock solution that handles volume at a SKU site level are now thinking about what that looks like in a year's time. We'll have to embrace managing data at a lower level. So there are various parties at various sides of the equation coming to the party.
Do you see the introduction of this these extra layers of functionality as being something that is absolutely inherent within the event systems that a retailer already has, as opposed to it's a new solution that's put there just for the purpose of serving this need?
Good question. Could go either way. I mean, I've thought a lot about our stock system. If we don't embrace this and commit to meeting the legislative drive, it potentially could become redundant. Therefore, we are committing to it. And we are plotting what that looks like. If there's some imposed centralized body that manages this process, then it's just be a question of sending data to it. So existing systems,
like an audit,
but again, to send data to it, you still have to track data at that lower level. So there's going to be, I'm repeating myself, but there's going to be impact on all systems, I think, and it is potentially, if it comes to be as in its complete entirety, it's a huge change.
Yeah. So setting aside the compliance requirement, setting aside the environmental benefit of doing this.
Well, it's the tracking and the visibility that should lead to environmental improvement. It's not going to directly affect it.
Yeah. But what else can be wrapped into this, or can retailers use this to drive other benefits?
Yeah, I say the obvious one that springs to mind is sort of counterfeiting. It's about a lot of brands, a lot of high-end products do a lot of work on that anyway, through whether it be measures on the ticketing or garments or RFID tracking, for example, of individual products. It's going to make the whole serialized world more prevalent. Therefore, theoretically, the validation of garments authenticity is going to improve.
Oh, right.
So I guess the people like I worked for Burberry for 4 years, and there was a lot of effort even back then into that world.
Yeah, I remember.
So to be able to pervasively track your merchandise at an individual garment level from manufacture through to sale, theoretically eradicates a lot of the grey market, not the grey market, the counterfeit market.
Yeah, for the luxury brands, I remember you telling me about the amount of work that went into stopping counterfeiting at Burberry. Anything else other than counterfeiting? Because obviously that applies to luxury brands, but I dare say some sort of more. I mean, brands.
I guess there's some sort of knock on or push into technology that exists already. So I'm not sure how it's going to affect RFID, because RFID isn't consumer accessible. Therefore, the QR code's been discussed. But the world of serialization leading or yielding stock accuracy, is something that all retailers seek. Therefore, it's a good thing. And if we build process around the legislative need and the ultimate drive to understanding what stock we have where, that's a positive.
I've mentioned to you a number of times over the years that RFID, obviously it's a technology which was launched that people said retailers will adopt in their
it's happening.
And it's happening now, but I mean, it's been around a long time. You're off to NRF next week, and I remember going to NRF many years ago, and RFID being something that we said this is going to be the next big thing, and it never was, but it's becoming more and more apparent, and this will drive it more. But I think the retailers are still missing an opportunity to use RFID more in the provision and delivery of a customer service, customer experience. Yeah, the idea of being able to pick up an item off the shelf and having a big screen.
Are you going to talk to me about magic mirrors again?
I am. Well, not magic mirrors so much, but the ability to use graphic walls more as interactive sales aids. But also, I actually started to think whilst you were talking that sort of my mind was sort of jumping forward a few stages and thinking, well, how far do these things go? Because for example, if you're actually, so if you're the jeans you're wearing have an RFID tag that's being tracked, so it's being tracked post sale. Would you actually imagine a time when a retailer could turn around and say, you've had your jeans for 12 months, you might be wanting to trade them
They're no longer in fashion, sir.
Yeah. Well, that's obvious from the jeans you're wearing today. That's not a problem for you, but it might be for me or Lucy or anyone else listening to this podcast.
Tracking the audience, sorry, Lucy.
Just drawing more people in. But it's that type of what comes next. I mean, this probably comes next, but what comes after that?
I mean, do you remember when RFID was talked about in the 2000s more from a retail perspective, the uproar from privacy groups in the US around, we're going to track everybody everywhere and it can't be, and it did quash the development of it for a long time. And the stuff we're now talking about, that actually the youth find quite acceptable, is far more intrusive. And literally, if you talk about what you just said around tracking garments post-sale and resale and repair, there needs to be a public acceptance of the impact of that statement.
It does. I mean, it's a massive shift. But then, over the last number of years, I think the things I would have personally thought, well, that will never be acceptable, that will never take off, suddenly now are
a mobile phone, that sort of thing.
Yeah, mobile phone, yeah. Be able to go into your house and turn on an electric light and the lights come on, that sort of stuff, yeah. But we are, things that we have to be very mindful, especially as technologists, that things that we had these wild ideas, the things only that they will never take off, but things are taking off. Yeah. They don't always take off when you have the idea, but they will follow straight behind.
There's some books about adoption curves and things, but yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Cool. So I think we've probably talked enough. I think the summary there is things are changing. Legislative and consumer pressure will drive change, and there's going to be a lot of work to do. I think we need to keep our eye on it.
And also, I think just to finish off, it's one of those things that you think, okay, but I've got more pressing matters, and there are probably always seemingly more pressing matters, but it's something that if you're not considering it, you should start considering it.
Absolutely, and I'd add to that. It's about, even if the matter's pressing, make sure it's tactically strategic, heading in the right direction for something is coming a few years down the line. Yeah. Don't make decisions that you're going to put technology solutions in place that are going in the wrong direction. Yeah. Make sure you've got an end game in mind.
That never happens in retail technology, does it?
It does in my world. Good. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks.
Speak again soon.
See you soon.
Bye.